Thank you, Peter. Well, as you can see, the title of the sermon is, Has Noah's Ark Been Found? Pardon? Oh, it's not on? Oh, this isn't good. You can see now? Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay, but I still have to run through this whole thing because I don't know how to do it any other way. Sorry about that. Alrighty, so we will try again. First of all, I want to say how nice it is to have our visitors. Daniel, good to see you, and Peter again, and Nellis, what a great surprise. It's so good to have you back in Alberta. So I hope you come a few more times before the end of the summer. Okay. Ernest Renan once said that all history is incomprehensible without Christ, because history is what has happened here on earth. And God, this is God's earth. He's been in control of it, and everything that has happened has gone through his hands. So as we look at what we're going to talk about, Noah's Ark today, remember that. This is a story about Christ. I have a question for you. How many of you remember the first time you saw pictures of Tutankhamun's tomb? Do you remember? A long time ago. I was a little kid. Well, I don't know how little. I think I was in around grade 5, maybe 6, when I first remember showing pictures of Tutankhamun's tomb. And right then and there, I decided that I wanted to be an archaeologist. It was a little bit later that I found out that most archaeologists sit around pushing dirt with a brush, and I thought that sounded really boring, so I decided archaeology would not be for me. But I've always had an interest, and I have always followed archaeological digs. There's some really great magazines out there that have, from a Christian perspective, what they are finding. Now, biblical archaeology has intrigued people for hundreds and even thousands of years. We know that Helena, Constantine's mother, was sent on pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and she was tasked with finding the sites of important events of the time of Christ. And if you go to the Holy Land today, it is littered with churches and pilgrimage sites that she found and believed to be authentic. And you know that it's not just the Christian world that has been interested in archaeology and things to do even with the Bible. If you've ever watched Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know that the Ark of the Covenant and Christ's chalice were two relics that any archaeologist and treasure hunter would dream about finding. One of my first encounters with the idea of Noah's Ark, other than, reading the Bible stories, took place when I was teaching in Majuro, the Marshall Islands, for a year. And we had their very first cruise ship arrive while I was there. And of course, it was a huge event. The whole island was really excited, and the ladies had been making things to sell to the tourists, and it was a really big deal. And a bunch of us went down to the dock, and we're talking with the people and things. And we got to know this older lady and her companion quite well, and they invited us on board for tea, and it was really very nice. But what was interesting to me is the length of the boat. the ship, I guess you're supposed to call it, was almost identical to the length of Noah's Ark. And it was a big boat, like it was huge, had multiple layers, of course, and it wasn't as big as the cruise ships today, but for us back then, 1981, it was big. And I remember thinking, that size could hold a lot of animals and a lot of people. So it started me at least thinking, what did happen to Noah's Ark? And I've read several books about people who have claimed they have found it, or they know people that were on the ark. And of course, as you read these, you just wonder, is it true or is it not? You would think that a wooden ship should have disintegrated, thousands of years ago. But I have always believed that God gives us enough evidence for our faith. He doesn't leave us and just say, blindly trust me. And that includes corroboration of certain biblical places and events. We know that Satan has been busy peddling the lie that the Bible is a book of myths, fairy tales, that the stories are allegories meant to make us better, nicer people, but they're not true, and that religion, like the communists bombarded their people with, was just an opiate for the masses. It was a way of keeping people under control. But before Jesus comes again, I believe there is going to be enough evidence placed with the authenticity of the Bible that we can, with confidence, believe the stories and the prophecies that come with the Bible. Now, biblical archaeology is a recent development. It began in the 19th century, so 1800s, which is not that long ago. It was a time when Christians in Europe and North America especially were looking for confirmations of biblical stories. And that was because anti-Christian sentiment was growing stronger and stronger. Think of the atheist movement, think of the agnostic movement, think of evolution. These things were demolishing the truths and the solidity of the Bible. And Christians were looking for faith building. Now, there were some amazing discoveries that happened in the 18 and 1900s that allowed us to be able to read the tablets that had been found in the papyrus scrolls and that type of thing. Some of them had not been readable before the Rosetta Stone. There was the Behistun inscription in Iran and the Moabite stone. They opened up a world that had been closed. And in that world, they found out that many things from the Bible were provable. And one of the major ones was the one about the Hittite nation. For many, many years, atheists had said the Bible cannot be trusted because it talked so much about the Hittite nation. I can't remember, but it's like 600 times in the Old Testament the Hittite nation was mentioned. And there was not a clue that there had ever been a Hittite nation. So people said, see, that proves the Bible is false. It just made up names, made up stories. It cannot be trusted. But that all changed in 1834 when a French archaeologist, his name was Frederic Texier, discovered monumental, huge amount of ruins in central North Turkey. Now, it did take more than 50 years after their discovery to clearly identify these ruins as the capital city of the Hittite nation. But people had to take notice that there had been Hittites. However, like today, there is a stubbornness among the experts. And even as late as 1910, that's 30 years after this capital had been positively identified, this guy noted that the Hittites were still being used as an example of an error in the Bible and proof of the general falsity of the book itself. So ideas don't die easily. But God would not let the disparaging of his word go unchallenged. And through the years, many faithful Christians have searched for proof that the scriptures are trustworthy, they are true. And I believe we're living in a time when physical proof is being revealed that backs up biblical accounts. Now, what's exciting to me is that within our Seventh-day Adventist church, there have been some very brilliant minds who are defending the creation story and the flood story. When I was a child living in Loma Linda, my piano teacher, her husband was William Shea, a very famous geologist within Adventism and archaeologist. And so I think maybe even then some of my interest in archaeology was being fed. But for those of you who have not heard of Robert Gentry, he was a research physicist whose area of expertise was the geophysical phenomenon of radioactive polonium halos. Now, this is way beyond most of our heads, but his hypothesis was that plutonium halos and granite, you know, granite's the bones of the earth, were created nearly instantaneously on day 3 of the Genesis week. And of course, evolutionists have loudly discredited his work, but some of their arguments do not have the ring of truth. And there is this tantalizing possibility that Gentry threw out to the world that God left a fingerprint in the rocks to give additional proof of creation week as written in the Bible. Another story with Adventists at its center is the Noah's Ark story. Now, the story begins near a small village in Turkey. There had been a lot of rain in that area, and they also were hit with 3 earthquakes. Now, they still have a lot of earthquakes, but this combination of the wet soil and the earthquake activity unearthed the remains that are today claimed to be Noah's Ark. This structure was discovered by a local shepherd in May of 1948. So then fast forward 11 years to October of 1959. A Turkish captain, Lihan Durupinar, noticed a strange formation on a photograph taken as part of a NATO geodetic survey. Durupinar informed the Turkish government of his findings, and word quickly spread to the United States about this photo. Life magazine ran a story along with Durupinar's aerial picture, and that's the one that you see on your right. Enough interest was generated by this picture that an expedition sponsored by the Archaeological Research Foundation was arranged. And included in this group of scientists were Rini Norbergen, who was a reporter and author and a Seventh-day Adventist, and George Vandeman, who I'm sure many of you know as a well-known SDA evangelist. Now, Captain Durupinar and Dr. Arthur Brandenberger, a renowned expert in photogrammetry, which is the practice of determining geometric properties of objects from photographs. They were also part of this team. Now, after a 2-day survey of the site, which is not very long, but they did do some digging and dynamiting inside the boat-shaped formation, that's what they were calling it. They made an official news release, and they concluded, quotes, "There were no visible archaeological remains, and that this formation was a freak of nature and not man-made," end of quote. Now, this Dr. Brandenberger, who was at the site, he felt that the official release was much too harsh and did not allow for the short time on the site. However, this site sat mostly unexplored until 1977, when Ron Wyatt, a Seventh-day Adventist amateur explorer, began to investigate the site. He made many trips to Turkey between August of 1977 and 1991. He ran, I'm not keeping up here. That's a picture of Ron Wyatt, and the picture on the right are tests that they did. They took radar scans. They took samples by drilling into the surface of the object, and they surveyed with metal detectors. Now, he supplied enough evidence to the Turkish officials that on the 20th of June, 1987, so 10 years later, the Turkish government officially designated the site as Noah's Ark National Park. They also announced plans to build a tourist information center at the site, which they did. And now, since the site is a national park, the drawback is that it means that no further excavations are allowed. So what evidence did the government take into account to make this a national park? Let's take a look. Number one, it is in the shape of a boat with a pointed bow and a rounded stern, as you can see. The exact length, as noted in biblical descriptions, brings it to 515 feet or 300 Egyptian cubits. Now, this part is interesting because all archaeologists, especially Christian ones, were looking for a ship that would be around 300 Egyptian, or 300 cubits. The Bible doesn't say Egyptian. And so that would make the ship 450 feet. So when they came to the Drupanar site, they said it's too big. It doesn't fit. It was over 500 feet. And Ron Wyatt thought about this, and he thought about it, and he remembered the verse in Acts that says, "And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of" who? The Egyptians. And he started thinking about that, because when you measure something, you have to know what you're measuring with, right? We don't hand somebody a meter stick and tell them to go, figure out inches. Usually we don't do that. It's too big. And so you have to have something that is the correct measure. And what archaeologists were using to this point was the Hebrew cubit, which unfortunately at the time that Moses wrote Genesis did not exist. So they were using a measurement that didn't fit with what Moses would have been thinking and writing at the time of Genesis. So anyway, when Ron took the Egyptian cubit, which Moses would have been trained to use, you arrive at 515 feet, and that is the exact size from front to rear of the Drupanar boat-shaped object. So number 3, it rests in the mountains in eastern Turkey, which match the biblical account. The ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat, more than one, plural. Now, it is speculated that the ark has moved. They know for sure it has moved. I shouldn't say they speculate. They speculate, though, that it started up where you can see the ark landing, and for some reason, probably a mud or a lava flow, it moved, and it got lost for generations. But the lava probably helped preserve this object. We'll just call it a boat-shaped object, because as you'll see later, there is still parts of it there. Number 4, the site contained petrified wood as proved by lab analysis. And you're gonna have to go study it out and look at all the proofs yourself. Not only is the wood petrified, which is really interesting, but it's laminated wood. So there are 3 types of wood in what you can see, and then there is a pitch that is at the end. You can see it kind of looks almost molten at the end. That's pitch that was there. But this process of laminating wood would have made it very strong, able to take a flood that it went through. Number 5, they also have found high-tech metal alloy fittings, as proved by separate lab analyses paid for by Ron Wyatt and then performed later by Kevin Fisher, that I'll introduce you to in a bit. Now, what is interesting is when the lab results came back, this metal contained aluminum metal and titanium metal. And if you know any with these vertical timbers and how they fit together. Number 7, this site has been occupied by an ancient village for millennia, very close to the Ark site. And the names of the surrounding places are interestingly a account of the flood. The nearby village is called Kazan in Turkish, and the English translation of this means the village of 8. It is not unusual for places to be named after historical events, so the name of the village of 8, may be a reference to the 8 survivors of the flood. Near to this village is another smaller village with a name that translates, "The crow will not stand." This may refer to the time when Noah released the raven from the ark. And another village in the same vicinity is called Where the Oars Were Reversed, like oars on a boat, again suggesting that a boat once passed over this area, where it began to slow down to its final resting place. So all of these were building credibility for the site. And these are the things that the Turkish government would have gone through as to whether this was an authentic site. Number 8, huge anchor. Did I go too far? Did it skipped one? Oh, I don't know what to do about that. Is there a way to go back?
Arrow back.
Arrow back. Oh, can you come do it? Like not tab.
No, there should be.
Oh, this. No?
Yeah, this is your camera.
Okay, here we go. Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Right
just,
here.
That's right, you can go forward and
Okay.
backwards that way.
you, Peter. Okay, take a look at this stone. This is a huge anchor stone, and there were multiple ones of these that were found near the ark, and from this little village, draped along there as though when they were hitting, they were falling off. Now, I don't have a good picture, but you can see the diagram on the right that these anchor stones were used through ancient history with sailing boats. These artifacts they call drogues, stone weights used to stabilize the ark in rough seas on the grounds that they all have a hole cut in one end as if to fasten a rope to them. And the way they would stabilize it is they were placed on the boat, dragging. And actually, this apparently is still a technique. I watched a guy who is a marine scientist, and apparently this technique is still used sometimes, where they put weights to stabilize the ship. Ron and his friend David Fassold, they discovered a total of 13 stones. And these are the largest drogue stones that have ever been discovered. If you go into the Mediterranean, you can find many that are smaller, like this sort of a size that they used. But these were made for a massive boat in very rough water. The original estimates put some of these stones at around 700 kilograms. That's over 1,500 pounds. And there were no doubt many more, but some of them were repurposed. For sure, they have found some that were made into memorial markers and headstones. So they know for sure there are 13 of them. So with all this evidence and more, the Turkish government voted to turn the site into a national park. That, however, did not stop the critics from vocally denouncing this amateur wannabe archaeologist. The scholarly world scoffed at Wyatt's proofs, and they declared it was just a geological formation. For years after Wyatt's death in 1999, little was heard of the boat-shaped formation in Turkey, at least for most of us. Like, I've heard of Ron Wyatt since the 80s, but everything kind of went dead, and I didn't hear anything for a long time. However, that did not mean that the site was forgotten. There were some people who did not accept the experts' opinion, and they continued to look for evidence that this boat-shaped structure was indeed Noah's Ark. And two of them were the most prominent ones are Kevin Fisher and Andrew Jones, both of whom I believe are Seventh-day Adventists. I haven't heard them. I know for sure that Kevin Fisher is an Adventist. Don't know for sure about Andrew Jones, but they both were at least raised Adventist. Okay, Kevin Fisher was quite young around the time that Ron Wyatt died, but was very taken by this idea of Noah's Ark. And Andrew Jones is an archaeologist and a computer programmer, like with modeling and that kind of thing. So I'll give you at the end of it a couple of their websites if you want to go and look. I've super been impressed with Andrew Jones's work, and he has so many very technical. If you're techie, it might make sense to you. It doesn't really to me, but he has a lot of stuff on his website. Now, the two of them have been working with a geophysicist named John Larson, and he modeled this after going through 3D scans that had been taken in the, around 2017, I believe, is when they took place. And of course, the technology has developed for all kinds of stuff. This has generated a lot of interest around the world. In fact, this image was used in a 2017 book that was directed by Cam Surtison. And he wants more testing done, more proof. However, in the last few years, in 2020s, there has been some amazing work that has been done that further confirms that this site contains a man-made structure rather than an anomaly of nature. So researcher Andrew Jones and lead scientist Dr. somebody Yüksel of the Department of Geophysical Engineering and Applied Geophysics Department of Istanbul University told British media that 3D scans of the area discovered a formation of the exact length of the ark, detailed in the Bible as being around 300 cubits in biblical terms. The other, let me show you, well, maybe, the other exciting news I'll let you see for yourself, because this is an interview with Ryan Morrow and Andrew Jones that will make the structure really come to life, because they have the graphics and everything. So Dean, if we could run that interview, please.
And that's largely because of Google. I thought that there was a consensus that this is just a
be, these parallel lines. Another lady, they didn't tell her what she was looking at. She's an expert from the States on these type of scans. And she said, I have found in the very center of this building, that's what she was calling it. She later asked, what is the building? She said there's a core, a hollow core all the way down. So there must have been a shaft for fresh air getting down, light getting down, everything else. So there's been some just really interesting things. Oh, I'm gonna put this up. This is so you can take a really good look at the scan results. And this is only for a little portion. I couldn't find the picture of it showing. It's just a minute little part of the whole structure. But that's what they were finding with this ground penetrating radar. There have been, especially last year, 2023, a lot of news places have been picking this up. Television stations, internet sites, newspapers. The New York Post reported on it. Saying is that there is a team that they're calling themselves the Mount Ararat and Noah's Ark Research Team, and it's comprised of 3 Turkish and 1 American university. And this is a quote from one of the news releases. The team extracted aged rock and soil samples from a geological formation in Turkey, which they believe contained the ruins of the vessel. Their findings also determined that clayey, I didn't know that was a word, clayey material, marine material, and seafood were present in the area between 5,500 and 3,000 years BC. And that was published in the Turkish newspaper Hurriyet or something like that. So if you are interested in doing a little more research, Andrew Jones's website is called noahsarkscans.com, and Kevin Fisher's is Art Discovery. Of course, there are many others. A lot of non-Adventist religious people are helping support these projects and doing more work on the sites. But yeah, I think that there's just some interesting things that the Lord still has to reveal, and He wants us to have a place where, an intelligent place to hang our faith. And with that, we'll close with number 608, Faith is the Victory. 608. Father in heaven, what a privilege it is to be living in these last days. We thank you so much that while you have told us what the future looks like, you have promised that you will be there. You have promised that you will be that rock of salvation, that you will be that. And we just thank you that you are giving the world things to think about. Those that may not believe, they're having to rethink what some of these things that you are showing truly are and what they mean. And if they are true, it means that you are alive, that you are in charge of this world, and you have a right to their soul because Jesus died for each one of us. And so I just pray that you will continue to strengthen our faith, that this week you will help us to remember that you want us to be those witnesses for you, and that you can only work with those that are obedient to you. I pray that you will change our hard hearts, that you will make them soft and pliable, and that as we hear the Holy Spirit's voice, we will listen and follow. We just leave our lives in your care. We leave this coming week in your care, and just thank you for everything you do for us day by day. And we pray all of this in the wonderful name of Jesus. Amen.